In 730 BC, a dark-skinned warrior king from the south conquered Egypt without the world remembering his name. For nearly a century, black pharaohs ruled one of history's greatest empires, then vanished from every textbook. This is the story of the dynasty that history tried to erase. If you love untold history that challenges everything you thought you knew, hit that like button right now and subscribe. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this incredible civilization was deliberately forgotten. Far to the south of ancient Egypt, beyond the great cataracts where the Nile tumbled over rocks and rapids, lay a land that history would forget. The Greeks called it Ethiopia. The Egyptians called it Kush. Today, we know it as Sudan. But in the ancient world, this was Nubia, the land of gold, the kingdom of ebony and ivory, a civilization that would rise to rule the greatest empire on earth. The Nubians were not strangers to Egypt. For thousands of years, these two civilizations had danced together along the Nile, sometimes as enemies, sometimes as trading partners, always watching each other with careful eyes. Egyptian pharaohs had invaded Nubia, enslaved its people, stolen its gold. Egyptian art depicted Nubians as servants and captives, dark-skinned foreigners bowing before Egypt's might. But the Nubians remembered everything. They absorbed Egyptian culture, worshipped Egyptian gods, built pyramids that touched the sky. And they waited. By 900 BC, while Egypt fractured and weakened, consumed by civil wars and divided loyalties, something extraordinary was happening in the south. The Kushite kings were unifying Nubia, building an empire that would eventually dwarf Egypt itself. King Alara began the transformation, creating a powerful state centered at Napata, beneath the sacred mountain Jebel Barkal. His successors would finish what he started. The student was about to become the master. Around 760 BC, King Kashta made his move, but this was no ordinary invasion. Kashta understood that true power came not from swords alone, but from something far more subtle. He married his daughter Amenirtis to the high priesthood of Thebes, inserting Kushite blood into the very heart of Egyptian religion. It was a masterstroke of political strategy, a quiet conquest that placed Nubian influence at the center of Egyptian spiritual life. Control the gods, control the people. But it was Kashta's son who would change everything. His name was Pierre, and he was unlike any conqueror the ancient world had ever seen. In 730 BC, Pierre looked north from his palace at Napata and saw chaos. Egypt, the once mighty civilization that had dominated the world for 2,000 years, had splintered into dozens of petty kingdoms. 22 different rulers claimed to be pharaoh. Civil war ravaged the land, the temples were neglected, the gods dishonored, the people suffering. To Pai, this was not just a political opportunity, it was a sacred duty. The victory stele that Pai erected after his campaign tells his story in his own words, carved in stone for eternity. It reveals a man of contradictions, a warrior who hated war, a conqueror who loved mercy, a foreigner who was more Egyptian than the Egyptians themselves. When Pi marched north with his Kushite army, he did not come as a destroyer. He came as Egypt's righteous savior. City after city fell before him. His armies were unstoppable, disciplined, fierce. But at Memphis, Egypt's ancient capital, Ptah faced his greatest test. The city's walls were thick, its defenses strong, its defenders defiant. The siege dragged on. Finally, Ptah's forces breached the walls and poured into the city like a flood. Memphis fell. One by one, Egypt's rival kings came to surrender. They prostrated themselves before this dark-skinned king from the south, offering him their crowns, their treasures, their loyalty. But here, Ptah did something that shocked everyone. He refused to meet with kings who hadn't properly purified themselves according to Egyptian custom. These defeated pharaohs, these men who claimed to be gods on earth, had to bathe and cleanse themselves before the Nubian king would even acknowledge their presence. PA was more devoted to Egyptian tradition than the Egyptians themselves. By the end of his campaign, PA controlled all of Egypt from the Mediterranean to the Sixth Cataract. He was master of the greatest empire in the world. And then, in a twist that history still struggles to explain, PA did the unthinkable. He went home. After conquering all of Egypt, after receiving the submission of every rival king, after achieving what no Nubian had ever achieved, Paye loaded up his boats with tribute and sailed south to Nubia. He left Egypt to be governed by his appointed officials and returned to his beloved homeland. Perhaps he was homesick. Perhaps he trusted his system too much. Perhaps he simply didn't want to be Egyptian, only to rule them. We will never know. But this decision would haunt his successors for generations. When Pa died, his brother Shabaka inherited an empire in transition. Unlike Pia, Shabaka understood that you cannot rule Egypt from Nubia. In 721 BC, he moved the capital to Memphis, sat fully upon the throne of the Pharaohs, and became Egyptian in every way that mattered. He commissioned building projects, restored temples, and performed the ancient rituals with perfect precision. Under Shabaka, the Kushite dynasty became the 25th dynasty of Egypt. Not invaders, not occupiers, but legitimate pharaohs in the eyes of gods and men. But the world was changing. To the east, a terrifying new power was rising. The Assyrian Empire, with its iron weapons and ruthless military machine, was swallowing nations like a hungry beast. Small kingdoms throughout the Middle East faced an impossible choice: submit to Assyria or resist and be destroyed. Egypt, under its Kushite pharaohs, chose resistance. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of civilizations. In 690 BC, a young man named Taharqa ascended to the throne. He would become the greatest of all the black pharaohs, a ruler so magnificent that his name would echo through history, even appearing in the Hebrew Bible. For 26 years, Taharqa presided over a golden age. Art flourished. Architecture soared to new heights. He built more monuments than any pharaoh had built in 500 years. His craftsmen created works of such beauty that they still take our breath away in museums today. From Nubia to the Mediterranean, from the desert to the sea, prosperity and peace reigned. Taharqa saw himself as the culmination of both Kushite and Egyptian greatness, the bridge between two worlds, the pharaoh who would unite Africa and preserve the ancient ways. His dark skin, so carefully depicted in statues and reliefs, was a source of pride, not shame. He was African, and he was pharaoh, and to him there was no contradiction in that. This was the pinnacle. This was the moment when Black Africa stood at the center of the known world, commanding respect from Judea to Libya, from Persia to Greece. But empires, no matter how bright, cast shadows. And Assyria was coming. In 671 BC, Assyrian king Esarhaddon launched his invasion. His armies wielded iron weapons that could shatter Egyptian bronze. His cavalry moved faster than anything the Nile had ever seen. His siege engines could crack walls like eggs. The Assyrians were the Roman legions of their age, efficient, brutal, unstoppable. Taharqa fought with everything he had. His Kushite warriors were brave, skilled, fierce. But bravery cannot defeat superior technology. Bronze cannot stand against iron. At the Battle of Memphis, the same city his uncle Pa had conquered decades before, Taharqa's forces were overwhelmed. The great pharaoh retreated south to Thebes, then further to Nubia itself. For the first time in centuries, foreign invaders held Egypt's crown. The black pharaohs had been driven from the north, but Taharqa did not give up. Twice more he would march north. Twice more he would reclaim parts of Egypt. And twice more the Assyrians would beat him back. It was a war of attrition that neither side could win, but neither side could afford to lose. When Taharqa finally died in 664 BC, His nephew Tantamani inherited not just a throne, but an obsession, the dream of restoring Kushite rule over all Egypt. Tantamani made one final, desperate attempt to reclaim the north. He managed to capture Memphis once more, and for a brief, shining moment, it seemed the Black Pharaohs might triumph again. But the Assyrian response was swift and merciless. They marched south, not just to Memphis, but all the way to Thebes, the sacred city, the religious heart of Egypt. And there, they did the unthinkable. They sacked Thebes. They looted its temples, destroyed its treasures, burned its libraries. The greatest city in Africa, a metropolis that had stood for over 1,000 years, was reduced to ruins. The destruction was so complete that Greek writers would speak of it with horror for centuries to come. That was the end. Tantamani retreated south to Nubia and never returned. After 75 years of rule, the Black Pharaoh's time in Egypt was finished. But the story of Kush was far from over. Back in Nubia, the Kushite kingdom did not die. It adapted. The capital moved south to Meroe, beyond Assyria's reach, beyond anyone's reach. There, protected by desert and distance, Kush would survive for another 1,000 years. They developed their own unique writing system, built hundreds more pyramids, traded with Rome and India, and created a civilization that was distinctly, proudly African. They had lost Egypt, but they had kept their souls. Yet somehow, despite ruling Egypt for 3/4 of a century, despite building monuments that still stand today, despite appearing in biblical texts and Greek histories, the Black Pharaohs disappeared from memory. Later, Egyptian dynasties chiseled their names off monuments. Greek and Roman writers mentioned them in passing, if at all. And when European archaeologists rediscovered ancient Egypt in the 19th and 20th centuries, they couldn't or wouldn't believe that Black Africans had once ruled the most sophisticated civilization on Earth. These pioneering Egyptologists, products of their racist times, created elaborate explanations to avoid the obvious truth. They called the 25th dynasty the Ethiopian dynasty, using a vague term that could mean anything. They suggested the Kushites were not really African, or that they were somehow different from other Africans, or that they were simply lucky barbarians who stumbled into power. Some even edited photographs of Kushite statues to make them appear less African. The erasure was not accidental. It was systematic, deliberate, ideological. Only in recent decades has archaeology begun to correct this injustice. Modern scholars, equipped with DNA analysis, linguistic studies, and honest eyes, have confirmed what should have been obvious all along. The Black Pharaohs were real, powerful, legitimate, and African. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were preservers. When Egypt was tearing itself apart, the Nubians saved it. When the temples were neglected, the Kushites restored them. When the old traditions were dying, these dark-skinned southerners kept them alive. The irony is profound and painful. The people Egyptians had once enslaved became Egypt's most devoted servants. Today, the pyramids of Nubia stand in the Sudanese desert, outnumbering even Egypt's famous monuments. More than 200 pyramids, steep-sided and proud, mark the graves of Kushite kings and queens. But few tourists visit them. Few documentaries feature them. Few people even know they exist. The Black Pharaohs built an empire, preserved a civilization, and changed the course of history. Then history forgot them. But we remember now. We know their names: Piye, Shabaka, Taharka, Tantamani. We see their faces in museum statues, dark-skinned and dignified. We read their words carved in stone, declaring their devotion to Ma'at, to justice, to the old ways. We understand now that African civilization did not begin or end at Egypt's borders, that Black kings could be sophisticated, powerful, and culturally advanced, that the story of Africa is richer and deeper than anyone imagined. This is not just ancient history. This is a reclamation. Every time we tell the story of the Black Pharaohs, we push back against the erasure. Every time we say their names, we restore what was stolen. If this story moved you, if it challenged what you thought you knew, if it made you angry or proud or amazed, hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss the stories that textbooks won't tell you. Comment below with the name of another forgotten civilization we should explore together. Share this video far and wide. Help us rewrite history. The Black Pharaohs ruled Egypt for 75 years. Don't let them be forgotten for another 2,700.